We're sailing into Nuuk, the smallest capital in the world. Along with their rainbow homes, another creative outlet, carving fine art from caribou antlers and whalebone. Down at the fish market, seal steak isn't going to waste at 50 kroner a piece. And over at the post office, Santa's own mailbox. This has been erected to handle all of the mail children the world over send to Santa Claus.
We receive about 100 and 150,000 letters a year, but we cannot answer all of them.
Camilla Ceasing tells me the mail is sent here because Greenland is so close to the North Pole where Santa lives.
We answer all of those with a return address.
And what is it the children are asking for?
Some kids do ask for material things, but some also ask for things like happiness or that their parents should get well, or some different kind of things.
The Nuuk post office is also swamped with babies' pacifiers.
It's a phase 2, bigger children, so they have to turn over their pacifiers to make Santa happy, so he can give them presents at Christmas.
Nearby, ancient Inuit artefacts have been collected in the Greenland National Museum. And these are the most significant. A group of Inuit women and children perfectly preserved. This indeed is a world-class archaeological find, as museum director Emil Rosing readily agrees.
They was being put in the grave about 1450, for 500 years ago.
And what do you believe happened to them when they died?
Perhaps they was coming by boats, skin boats, in this little bay. And iceberg, perhaps, was fallen down and killed these people.
Once they were laid to rest, the combination of dry air and a low ground temperature mummified these bodies, preserving them exactly as they were when they died. For the past 5 centuries, the bodies of these 6 women and 2 children remained untouched. That was until 30 years ago when 2 hunters made this stunning discovery.
There was 2 young men. It was a cold day in winter, and one of them has cold feet, and he tramped in the earth. He opened a stone, some flat stone, and could see this the first body. It was placed 3 persons in the first grave, and the other was 3 and a little baby, and the other 3 ladies and 1 young boy in 7 years.
Of all the bodies, the most poignant is the baby, just 6 months old, so incredibly well preserved that the hair and eyebrows are still in place. As was the custom at the time, it's thought the baby may have been buried alive alongside the mother. Archaeologists and scientists have now studied the mummies thoroughly, gaining insight into how the Inuits lived so long ago. A thick morning sea fog greets the Professor Multanoski as it ploughs still further south down the of Greenland.
What makes the adventures of the Vikings all that more extraordinary is the atrocious weather conditions with which they had to contend in the flimsiest of craft. Even today, for us sailing in this modern icebreaker here off the coast of Greenland, we have to contend with very thick sea fog every morning, like this, with very heavy ice further down the coast.
For the next day and a half, we sail ever southward, encountering an increasing number of icebergs, just as the Vikings were trailing would have. These have been swept by powerful currents down the east coast and around the southern tip of Greenland. Things aren't going to get any easier. On the far southwestern tip of Greenland, we sail inland up a deep channel known as Eric's Fjord, after Eric the Red, who made history here. And like that famous Viking 1,000 years ago, our passage too is littered with towering bergs.
This is where the Vikings first settled, Quasiusuk. Eric the Red deemed this place a true Greenland.
This is where Eric and just over 100 of his followers settled in this valley. It was a glorious summer day just like this when they decided to call this home and lay the foundations for buildings like this.
Can you imagine how life was for those Vikings here in Greenland those 1,000 years ago? This is a faithful recreation of Eric the Red's house. The walls are made of sod and are this thick, and inside live some 50 to 60 men, women and children.
The walls and beams would have been timber, but with trees scarce here in Greenland, material would have been imported all the way over from Norway. Rugs made from seal fur would have lined walls and floors. And clothing would have been woven in this method. Stones used to weigh down the wool from sheep that grazed outside. Yes, that's a chapel beside Eric's house. Eric the Red, the warrior Viking, had a God-fearing wife. Legend has it that she refused to sleep with him until it was completed. As I inspect these new buildings, a team of workmen are adding the finishing touches.
At that time, there was 3,000 people living in this area here. Not here in Brattahlid, in the South Greenland.
Sven Felsted is in charge of this reconstruction. He and his workers have flown over from Iceland, which, after all, is where Eric the Red came from.
The farmer will not let him have the seed back, so he killed the man.
That's right, Eric was a murderer, and yet he's deemed a hero both in Iceland and Greenland because of his explorations. Eric's son, Leif Erikson, is equally revered. He's being honoured in this voyage, which has now brought us here to Eric's Fjord. The Islandinger is a superb replica of an actual Viking ship and is being sailed along the same route taken by Leif Erikson 1,000 years ago. Gunnar Eggertsson built this modern version and now captains it on this historic voyage.
This one here was a battleship. This is a direct replica from a ship which was found in Norway, 1882. And this is a battleship.
So Gunnar, Leif Erikson is somebody you can trace your direct family history back to.
He was born in Iceland and brought up until he was 10 years old in Iceland. And his mother was born also in Iceland, in the same valley. And I'm a direct member from them.
Just as the Vikings did, the Islandinger has sailed from Iceland and is now heading for the same spot where Eric the Red landed and settled with his family. Leif Erikson later sailed from here to North America, a journey that this replica will also undertake. As the Icelandica sails on to make its historic landing in Greenland, other Viking celebrations are underway to greet it.
Ljós bið ég allar, helgar kindir, meiri og minni.
Beautiful, what does that mean?
It means, listen to me everyone. I'm going to tell the old stories that you want to hear, that the gods tell me to tell you.
From all over Scandinavia and Iceland, Viking enthusiasts have gathered, including woodcarver Robert Fredriksson.
It's an old motif, and the style is an old style called Mammen style. It's around 960, 980.
Then there's swordsman Per from Norway.
A beautiful fur. This is a fur of
Siberian wolf.
Siberian wolf.
Yeah. You had to be a really rich man to wear the clothing and the silver I wear. So I'm a rich man, I'm a soldier. I'm a merchant soldier from the Joms Vikings.
And from Iceland, Esther, Brynhilda and Ellen breathe life back into Viking ballads. To celebrate the Viking arrival in Greenland, crowds are converging on Eric the Red's rebuilt house.
When it comes to celebrations, this is about as big as it gets here in Greenland. People have sailed and flown in here for the last week, including the leaders of Greenland, Denmark and Iceland.
Watched by the Queen of Denmark and President of Iceland, a choir of Greenland's finest singers perform. And there in front of them the Viking battleship appears, a scene from 1,000 years ago. The Inuits are represented too, this sealskin boat filled with women and children and trailed by a man's kayak, as was the custom. Now this is a real Eskimo roll, and that's real freezing water. Finally, our modern-day Viking sailors land, although this millennium, there's royalty there to greet them. It's a fitting tribute to a time, 1,000 years ago, when Scandinavia's power was at its greatest. Back on the Professor Multinoski, we leave the Viking celebrations to retrace their passage back to Iceland. Off Cape Farvel, nature turns on a superb golden farewell to Greenland. And then darkness descends as we head into the depths of the North Atlantic Ocean. For the next 3 days we plough eastwards. Every league is a challenge, thick fog and big icebergs here calling for very cautious sailing. We thread our way carefully through a sea that is now almost completely covered with bergs. Bergs with seals atop. We pass too close for their comfort and many slide off into the icy water. Ahead of us now, Iceland.
Our final week in Viking territory will be spent exploring Iceland. Now, not only is this a land of fire and ice, but as we're about to discover, there are many other aspects of life here that make this place truly unique.
Iceland is home to just over 250,000 people, descendants of the early Scandinavian and Celtic settlers.
I think I'm still the strong, independent Icelandic woman as the Vikings were in the old times.
Helga Gildadottir has spent all of her life in the Icelandic capital of Reykjavik.
We tend still to go out and explore the world, and we actually talk about we're going in for a Viking trip. As it says in Icelandic, við förum í Viking.
The clothing Helga is wearing today is from the 19th century.
Today we use this as our national costume for celebrations.
And that cap?
It was the first thing they put on and last thing they took off.
Helga works at the Abe Open Air Folk Museum, where buildings from a century ago have been preserved. The staff here reenact activities from that period, from knitting and sewing to preparing a Viking favourite, dried fish. The Icelanders' determination to hold on to their uniqueness extends to their horses. Icelandic horses are derived from pure and fine old bloodlines imported by the Vikings, with new imports officially prohibited.
And if you take a horse, Icelandic horse, and bring him, for instance, to Germany, you can't bring him back, not a saddle.
Sigrun Ingolfsdottir and her family operate an Icelandic riding school in Hesta. The Icelandic horse is truly unique, and like any other breed, it has 5 distinctive gaits.
Well, they have the regular 3 gaits that other horses have, the walk and the trot and the gallop. Then they have the tolt, which is a 4-beat gait.
So we're enjoying all sorts of paces here today. This slower, more elegant pace comes very, very easily, very, very naturally to these horses.
Yes, it's easy for them. It's not strange for them to go into the tolt.
The 5th gait is known as the pace.
That's quite fast, and we often call it the flying pace, because literally the horse doesn't touch the ground between the steps, it just flies above the ground.
How do you feel when you're doing this?
It's a great feeling.
Another great feeling is exploring Iceland's glaciers.
This is thrilling stuff. About 13% of all of Iceland is covered with glaciers like this. Now this is the Langjökull Glacier. It's not only the 2nd largest here in Iceland, but in all of Europe.
Iceland was once covered by a much larger ice cap. This Langjökull Glacier was formed around 2,500 years ago, well after the Great Ice Age. But with global warming, even this is melting. Today, I'm riding across the glacier to a man-made ice cave. Winding through a labyrinth of passages, I encounter a sizable room, almost large enough to stand in. Local skiers shelter from blizzards here. They've even carved out a bed of ice. Off the glacier, I encounter some of Iceland's remarkable volcanic landscapes. Hundreds of underground streams emptying from walls of cooled lava. And the imposing Gullfoss Falls. Here the river Havita drops over two separate falls into a deep canyon.
They're so powerful at these falls here at Gullfoss that they create this most amazing updraft. And if you get the wind in the wrong direction, you'll get very wet.
Of all of Iceland's natural treasures, its hot springs are proving to be its most lucrative asset. So much hot water is bubbling to the surface around Iceland that the authorities have tapped into it. It's fed into pumping stations and piped to every home in Iceland. Fancy that, free hot water in one of the world's most freezing and expensive countries. There's so much of it that it's also piped under crops. This farmer's broccoli is flourishing from the warm water. Elsewhere, boiling water is pumped into huge spas, like this one at Blue Lagoon. Even on the coldest of Icelandic days, thousands of Icelanders congregate here to swim and thaw out. And finally, there are the geysers. These erupt when boiling water deep in the spring explodes after being trapped by cooler water on the surface. These spectacular explosions are around the Great Geyser, which exploded from the 14th century until the beginning of the last century. Trouble was that over-enthusiastic tourists tried to aggravate the Great Geyser into erupting by pouring dirt and rocks into it, but instead it stopped it completely. Thankfully, the surrounding geysers still explode every few minutes without any added stimulation. Just imagine how the Viking conquerors would have felt all those centuries ago, gazing on these awesome natural spectacles for the first time. 1,000 years and more since their conquests, the Vikings and their indomitable spirit are still revered here in Iceland.
I have a Viking restaurant here, and also I was the beginner of the Viking festival.
There's still, I think, a bit of a Viking in us all here in Iceland.
Thousands of descendants from the Vikings gather once a year here in Iceland's Westman Islands to make merry, just as their Viking forefathers did, with music, drink, and that powerful Viking symbol, fire. For the fearless Vikings believed that when their world did finally end, it should end in flames.